I used to live in an old house at the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, just a cozy place with creaky wooden floors and a history that stretched back for generations. One chilly autumn evening, as I settled into bed, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom door. I thought it might be my imagination playing tricks on me, but the sound was so real. I pulled the covers up to my chin and listened intently. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, as if someone were pacing back and forth. My heart raced and I felt a lump in my throat. Nobody else was supposed to be in the house. I mustered up the courage to peek out into the hallway, but there was no one there. I tried to convince myself it was just an old house settling or the wind outside making strange noises. But then, I heard a faint whisper. It was too soft to make out the words, but it sounded like someone was speaking right outside my door. I called out, "Is someone there?" There was no response, but the footsteps stopped. My hands were trembling as I slowly opened the door, revealing an empty hallway. I tiptoed down the creaky stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw a faint, translucent figure standing in the living room. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothing. She had a sad, distant look in her eyes, and her lips moved silently as if she were trying to tell me something. I couldn't believe my eyes. I stumbled back up the stairs and locked myself in my room, terrified and confused. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next day, I did some research at the local library and discovered that the house had a long history. It turned out that a woman had lived there many years ago and had tragically passed away in the very room where I had heard the footsteps. I never saw the ghostly figure again, but I always felt her presence in that house. I like to think that she was just a lost soul, trying to find her way home. And even though it was scary at the time, I can't help but feel a sense of compassion for her, trapped between this world and the next. The old house held its secrets, and I had encountered a glimpse of its haunted past. In my youth, I worked as a night guard at an old, eerie asylum on the outskirts of our town, a place steeped in a sinister history. My job was straightforward: keep intruders at bay and alert the authorities to any odd occurrences. During those first nights, I patrolled the gloomy, winding hallways, feeling the weight of the asylum's ominous reputation. However, on the fourth night, the silence was shattered by faint, mournful cries that drew me to a dimly lit room. Inside sat a young woman, her appearance unsettling, with tangled hair hiding her face as she wept. Despite my growing fear, I couldn't leave her in that pitiable state and asked if she was okay. She didn't respond, only continued to cry. As I reached out to touch her shoulder, her sobbing stopped, and she slowly turned to reveal a face marked by immense sadness. In a bone-chilling whisper, she uttered, "Help." Terrified, I recoiled, fleeing the room and rushing through the dark, echoing corridors until I found myself outside. The eerie cries had ceased, and the heavy sense of foreboding lifted. I never returned to that job, haunted by the encounter. My curiosity led me to research the asylum's history, and I uncovered the tragic tale of Eleanor Crane, a former patient who had inexplicably disappeared. Determined to unravel the mystery and offer closure, I returned to the asylum. Venturing into the forgotten basement, I stumbled upon Eleanor's patient file beneath a dusty tarp. It revealed a chilling truth. She had been unjustly committed, pleading for justice, and then vanishing without a trace. Compelled by a sense of responsibility, I shared the evidence I had discovered with local historians and journalists. The asylum underwent a transformation, becoming a museum dedicated to preserving the past and the stories of those who had suffered within its walls. In the years that followed, Eleanor's spirit seemed to find peace, and I moved on from my role as a night guard, forever marked by my encounter with the paranormal. It was a dark night when I first entered Willowbrook Manor, a very old house perched on a hill just outside of town. I took on the job of looking after the place while the owner was away. The house had been around for a long time, and it had a spooky history. Little did I know that it also had a scary secret that would soon become a big part of my life. At first, things were quiet. I kept myself busy with repairs and taking care of the big old house. The manor had lots of rooms, and it felt like a big, confusing maze with all its creaky hallways and dimly lit spaces. It was both fascinating and a bit creepy. After a few weeks, strange things started happening. Things would disappear and then show up in different parts of the house. I thought maybe I was just forgetful, or that old houses had their own strange quirks. But there was something else that bothered me. It felt like someone was watching me all the time. One chilly evening in the fall, as I was going up the big staircase to my room, I heard soft piano music. The spooky tune echoed through the house, and I felt like I had to follow it. The music led me to the music room, which was a dimly lit room in the middle of the house. Inside, there was a grand piano, and it looked like it was being played by invisible hands. I watched in amazement as the keys moved on their own, playing a sad song. There was no one else in the room, and it felt really cold, like there was a ghost there with me. I was scared, so I ran away from the room. But my curiosity got the best of me, and I came back the next night. The piano was playing again, and I felt like I had to be there to listen to it. I couldn't explain it, but the music felt like it was telling a story of sadness and longing. I kept going back to the music room night after night. It was like something was pulling me there, like a magnet. I started feeling connected to the invisible pianist, as if we were sharing something special. As time went on, I got more and more obsessed with finding out who was playing the piano and why. It was like I was under a spell, unable to think about anything else. I needed to know the secrets of Willowbrook Manor and the ghostly musician who haunted it. One day, while I was exploring the attic, I found old letters and journals that had belonged to people who had lived in the house before. As I read their words, I discovered a sad story that sent chills down my spine. The house used to belong to a talented piano player named Eliza Hawthorne. She hardly ever left the house and poured all her feelings into her music. Her music was beautiful, but also filled with sadness. She had a husband named Victor, but he got sick and died while he was away from home. Eliza was left all alone, and it drove her crazy. She believed that she could still talk to Victor through her music. The more I read, the more I realized that Eliza's story was just like mine. She had become obsessed with the piano, thinking that Victor's spirit was inside it. Her music was a way for her to talk to him, even though he was gone. It was like she was trying to connect with him from the other side. The journals got scarier and scarier as I read on. Eliza's mind started to fall apart, and she thought she could bring Victor back to life with a dark ritual. It was a desperate act that came from her deep sadness and loneliness, and it didn't end well. When I closed the journal, I realized something terrifying. I had become part of Eliza's story without even knowing it. The music I heard every night was like a cry for help from beyond the grave. Determined to find out the truth and end the haunting, I explored the basement and found a hidden room. Inside, there was an old piano covered in dust. It looked exactly like the one in the music room. I started playing the piano, trying to copy the sad song I had heard every night. As I played, I felt like I was connected to Eliza. It was like we were sharing our feelings through the music. The room filled with a bright light, and I felt Eliza's presence there with me. I could hear her voice, soft but full of emotion, saying, "Victor." It was a bittersweet moment, like a reunion between two people who loved each other but had been separated by death. As I played, the room seemed to come alive with energy, and I felt Eliza's spirit slowly disappear, finally finding peace. The house, which had always felt scary, now felt calm and peaceful. I left Willowbrook Manor, forever changed by my encounter with Eliza's ghost. The house, once a place of fear, was now a place where lost souls could find rest. And I, the caretaker of their story, would carry their memory with me always. A reminder of the power of love that could even transcend death. It all began on a crisp autumn evening when a group of us, 5 in total, decided to spend a weekend at an old, secluded cabin deep in the woods. We were young and seeking adventure, oblivious to the ominous history that shrouded the cabin. As we arrived, the sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dense trees. The cabin, weathered by time and forgotten by most, loomed before us. It was a quaint but eerie structure, with creaky wooden floors and windows that seemed to hold the secrets of years long past. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of age, and dust motes danced in the dim light. We settled in, unpacked our supplies, and lit a fire in the old stone hearth. Our laughter and excitement filled the cabin, banishing any initial unease we felt. As night descended, we huddled together around the crackling fire, sharing ghost stories and sipping on hot cocoa. The wind outside whispered through the trees, and the sound seemed to echo the tales we told. But in our youthful bravado, we brushed off any unease and scoffed at the notion of the supernatural. The hours passed, and one by one we retired to our respective rooms. I was bunking with my best friend Sarah in a room at the end of the narrow hallway. We settled into our sleeping bags, listening to the rhythmic howl of the wind. Just as we were drifting into slumber, we heard something that made us both sit up in bed. Faint, mournful weeping, like someone sobbing in the distance. We exchanged nervous glances, our courage waning. Sarah whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's probably just one of the others playing a prank," I replied, trying to convince myself more than her. But the weeping continued, growing louder and more distinct. It was as if someone was in the room with us, their sorrow echoing through the walls. We knew then that it couldn't be a prank, and fear gnawed at the edges of our bravado. Summoning our courage, we grabbed flashlights and ventured into the hallway, following the sound of the weeping. It led us to a door we hadn't noticed before, a small, hidden door at the end of the hallway, partially concealed by an old, moth-eaten tapestry. As we pushed the door open, our flashlights illuminated a cramped, dusty attic. In the corner, seated on an antique chair, was a woman in a tattered white dress. Her long, disheveled hair concealed her face as she continued to weep. My voice quivered as I asked, "Who are you? What's wrong?" The woman didn't respond, only continued to cry. Sarah reached out to touch her shoulder, but just before her hand made contact, the woman suddenly turned, revealing a face twisted with sadness and despair. Her eyes were hollow, and her lips moved silently, as if she were trying to speak. In a trembling voice, she finally whispered, "Help me." Fear coursed through us as we stumbled back, our flashlights flickering. The woman's presence was chilling, and her despair seemed to seep into our very souls. Without another word, we rushed back to our room, slammed the attic door shut, and barricaded it with a heavy dresser. The rest of the night was sleepless, our minds haunted by the ghostly encounter. We questioned our sanity, but the weeping in the woman's face remained etched in our memories. At first light, we shared our experience with the others. They were skeptical but agreed to investigate. When we returned to the attic, the hidden door had disappeared, leaving only a blank wall where it once stood. We spent the day searching for any clue about the mysterious woman, but the cabin revealed nothing. That night, as we sat by the fire, the wind outside carried with it the faint sound of weeping, a mournful reminder of the haunting presence we had encountered. We left the cabin at the break of dawn, eager to escape the unsettling atmosphere. As we drove away, I couldn't help but look back at the cabin, wondering about the woman's story and the secrets it held. To this day, I am haunted by the memory of that night, the weeping that echoed in the darkness, and the ghostly woman in the attic. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes, in our quest for adventure, we may stumble upon things better left undisturbed, and that the line between the living and the dead is often thinner than we dare to imagine.